Welcome to the CG Pro podcast. This is episode 85. Today we have with us Andy Beach, former CTO of Microsoft. And if you enjoy what you hear today, we'll be back again in a couple of weeks with another podcast. I also just wanted to quickly highlight CG Pro is a school and we train people in the cutting edge of computer graphics. And we do have an open day tonight at 5 p.m. Pacific time. So if you're interested, sign up. We'll drop a link in to the live stream. And I'd love to see you there. It's an open session. Come and ask questions and join us on the cutting edge of CG and AI. Andy, welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here. Andy's former CTO of Microsoft and many, many other things as well, which we'll get into in a second. But Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, of course, Ed. Thanks so much for inviting me on. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Well, lots of curiosity, lots of things that I want to ask you, but I'd love to just start by asking, typically the way these begin, just how did you get into the things that you love to do these days? Was there something from early on in life, from childhood, that inspired you towards technology?
It's funny, even though I was CTO of Media and Entertainment at Microsoft, I remind people that I was actually a failed filmmaker. So I'm a graduate of the Savannah College of Art and Design. I was going to be a documentary filmmaker, knew that was my passion, knew that's where I was going, loved to tell stories visually. And as I started working in the 90s in New York, I'd always been a technical kid, grew up in a household full of computers. I was always getting hired for being able to do technical things with the content. I was one of the first people that Mini found that could compress the video or do something with it. Before we even had encoding tools, I was playing around with command line tools and ripping MP3s and things like that. And so very quickly, I switched from doing production work to more around live streaming and encoding of content. I did that for a number of years and kind of thought that was going to be my career. And then in the 2000s, after a couple of different jobs, I got hired to be a product manager and run product development for an encoding company. And that was sort of what I called my shift to the dark side, to go from being a creator of content to a creator of the tools for content creation. And that was a lot of fun. It really is the first time I actually worked with Microsoft. They were a seed funder of that company.
Wow.
I got to work with teams that were live streaming the Olympics. I built the encoders that did that back in like 2008. We live streamed the Super Bowl. We did a ton of different things with sports leagues, and so as that company was getting acquired, I found another company that did a very similar thing, moved to that, and then realized I felt like I'd already done that stuff. I felt like there was nothing else I was going to contribute in that world, and about that time, interestingly enough, Microsoft was looking to expand from just being the Xbox, just being a game platform, to being a media platform. And they were beginning to build out media applications, and they wanted people with encoding knowledge, but also had sort of a good network of technical and media related folks in the industry. And so I got recruited to come help build media applications and for the Xbox, and did that for a number of years, helping get that launched purely as a contractor. Like, I never planned to be at Microsoft. I actually never thought in the world I would work at Microsoft. And then I got in there and I was like, oh, you guys are pretty cool. You're way more laid back than anybody in the press would believe you to be. And they had a great work-life balance, and they had just a good vibe. I got a good feeling out of it. And so Satya Nadella took over, and one of the first mandates was, we can't have contractors as subject matter experts. We want, if we want you for your talent, we want you to be a full-time employee. And 75% of that team I was on was a were contractors. So they sort of came through and gave us the option of like, do you want to be full time? We'll put through interviews. And so I ended up doing an interview and taking a role at Microsoft. Again, sort of thinking like, well, this will be a couple of years of interesting stuff. And it turned into 12 years of being at Microsoft and a number of
Wow.
different teams where I got to build a variety of media type solutions across like book publishing and journalism, movie studios, broadcasters. I got to work with more sports leagues and take on building out a direct to consumer platform for the NBA. And then became CTO. But I think by dint of just still being there and being the person that talked with people the most about media related tech projects, I sort of just inherited all of it as a sort of a strategy role, and did that for really about the last 5 years I was there before I decided it was time to just leave and go do something else. I think part of what I was struggling with in my role there was that I saw this great opportunity and all the stuff that AI was doing, and not to say that wasn't part of my day to day conversation there. In fact, all I got to talk about the last 2 years, I think, was AI. Very early on, I think right after ChatGPT got announced, I made a declaration that the one gift generative AI gave us is that I got to stop talking about the metaverse to everybody, because before Gen AI, everybody just wanted to talk about avatars and AR, VR, and the metaverse, and so it knocked that out of the way for a couple of years at least. Um, but I think the problem I saw that I was having was that I was only getting to really talk to these like top customers of Microsoft, like the top 500 accounts, and all the interesting work was being done in these much smaller places because it's such a new greenfield area that the innovation is coming in a lot of different ways. So I sort of wanted to get back into the startup and grassroots world and be able to do more of that work hands on. And so I left in January and have been doing consulting and talking and writing and saying all the things Microsoft wouldn't let me say, and enjoying myself.
Right. Wow, amazing. Yeah, I mean, there's pros and cons to both big and small companies, right? More.
Yeah, it's a lot of different scale, right? I think you see a millions of good ideas in the small places. You just don't have the huge budget to go chase them all down. And the flip is almost uh, uh, in that other space. You have such a larger budget, but you have such scrutiny on you're only allowed to take the one shot, and everybody wants to weigh in and decide on whether that's the right one. So you end up feeling like it's a death by a thousand committees as part of the process.
What so you mentioned being there as a contractor and then going all the way up to being a CTO, which is a very prominent position in a place like Microsoft. What can you explain your take on what a CTO is and does? I know I'm sure it varies a bit, but
It's super variable, and it's funny. We had probably 25 different CTOs at Microsoft, probably even more than that, hiding out. It in my world, it really just meant I was the senior most technical person involved in the media industry space. And there are even in sort of a smaller company, I think there's lots of different flavors of what a CTO is and does. You have CTOs that are sort of purely academic, and they're really like a really good architect. They know plumbing and infrastructure, and they have a vision, but they're probably not going to sit down and do the coding to get the thing built, whatever that might be. You have others that are just really good managers and know how to talk and manage a technical team and keep them on track and keep them moving forward. And then you have like the truly passionate, hands-on coders who want to be in there, sort of working side by side with the team, building out whatever the solution and whatever the software looks like. So I think it ends up taking a lot of different views. My personal version of it, I think nobody would ever run my code in production. At least they shouldn't. God help them. I think the last time any code my hand touched was probably around 2014 or 2016. That was in production, and that should all be gone by now. But
You'd be surprised though. Sometimes that
oh,
sticks
you
around.
you would be shocked. There are actually stories about that from even the days of me being a product manager. I when I was at Microsoft, I walked through a facility that still had a couple of my encoders sitting there, and I got to point at them and take a picture with them. And I was like, "This company hasn't even existed for a decade, and you're still running that product," which is kind of amazing. um, but yeah, no, I think what kind of CTO was I? I mean, obviously, I could have a technical conversation with execs and product people, both from a partnership perspective, like the ecosystem that works in this space, because it's never a single company that does this. But I also had a vision. I know a lot of people in this industry, and I spent a lot of time thinking around like who are the right people to bring together. Like, what is the solution that we're trying to solve, and who are the players that it takes to pull that together, and in order to pull it off. So I felt like I spent a lot of my time building technical relationships and then coming up with an idea and then helping us go prove that and figure out how we collectively sort of take that thing to market, whatever it looks like.
Right. What are some good qualities to have if somebody would aspire to become a CTO?
Um, I mean, it a passion for the technology and the infrastructure. I think I I would also maybe say a strong desire to not take on the business side of it. Not to say you're not doing the business side, but you're willing to cede some of that to a partner, whoever that looks like, so that they're arranging more of the business and the marketing deals and the other pieces that go into what you're doing. But you have a strong sense of the technology that's going to drive whatever your solution and whatever your piece of this is, and the ability to go help make that happen, and build a team to put it together. Again, unless you're a passionate hands-on coder, yeah, you're going to need those trusted people who you can hand an idea, and then you have to have almost your own language of how you work with them to go get a thing done.
Do you, speaking of code and being kind of hands-on, do you do you think that it's necessary or advisable to kind of come from that level of production, as in being able to code? You mentioned your code kind of slowing down over the last 8 years or
Oh
so,
yeah,
but to be able to at least or come from it.
I think there's a twofold aspect there. In order to have the right level of empathy with what all of the engineers that you're going to work with are going to do, you have to understand it. So I would say you have to at least have training in that world or have gone through the process. Like you have to have sweated in that same world, and then you will have a better appreciation for what it is they're doing, and it'll also help you in the conversations as you're trying to size out and make realistic expectations for what they can do and what can be done. I think the reverse of that is that is one of the few ways you will also have the respect of that team, right?
Yeah.
Is that they know you come from that world. I think they get highly suspicious of a leader in their side who doesn't come from their side of the world or understand what it is they're doing, and it just builds trust. If they've seen you, you may not be the best at it, but if you understand the world that they're doing, and you can go have the conversations they don't want to have with product people, salespeople, customers, and others, then you build that trust and earn the respect.
Right. They'll listen to you if they know you've spent hours chasing down a semicolon, but
A
otherwise
hundred
maybe
percent.
not. Or maybe not so much now, because now AI can go find your missing semicolon for you. But
You would hope.
you would hope. Well, it's interesting because I've for the first time I think noticed some ads online offering degrees in becoming a CTO, and it sort of reminds me a bit of things maybe from the military, or not that I was in the military, but the people can kind of fly in as an officer in the military from college, or you can work your way up from
Right.
being the soldier, which is kind of what you were describing.
Yeah, I think that is probably a good analog to this. I think you want to spend some time in that in the field, and it helps them build that trust. And again, it helps you realistically understand what's practical. I think there's a misconception if you're still technical, but all you've ever done is sort of the product management side of it, or the product building side of it. You're fundamentally lacking a little bit of the input that you need in order to know what it takes to run engineering sprints and to manage a team of developers, particularly across something that's super complex, that has like a complex front end, but has a lot of back end infrastructure and dependencies now on AI, which is just a constantly changing pile of sand in many ways. Like the tech moves so quickly that to think you know it is almost a foolhardy game.
Yeah, I think for me it's change. It's been more change, more frequent. The frequency, I guess, has been higher than any point I've known professionally. The frequency of change now seems something which is, at least I don't feel like I've ever seen it. No, a memory I know is fortunately mushy, but I do feel like it. The people, I guess, try and express it as things like exponential technology or whatever. Not entirely sure how you measure it or compare it to that. But how
Well,
do
I
you feel
know.
about that?
Yeah, so I feel like having started this world having started in sort of like a very hardware centric world, that was already quickly eroding and turning into software. I will say that that hardware world, you felt like the train of development was sort of like these. I mean, 1 year was fast, 2 to 3 years was realistic, right? Because you would have a prototype, and then you would have a system out there, and then someone would take that system and give you feedback, and there would probably be a hardware update or a manufacturing change. So you had lots of tooling parts that had to change. And then software came along, and it sort of became like, oh, we can change all of this much faster. And now, like, every year we're going to have a new update, or every 6 months maybe, but really maybe a new minor feature goes in, but then big features are like every year and a half. We're going to have like giant feature changes that change everything we're doing. And now with AI, the velocity feels like it's in like weeks and months of
Hmm.
where we see fundamental changes. Like we see infrastructure changes at least every 6 months, where like the number of tokens consumed go down for what you're doing, or the model gets a massive upgrade that changes the nuance and complexity of how it's able to answer something. And but then the applications that are built on top of that are just as rapidly evolving, because of again, in part, the tooling that we have has AI componentry to it that makes it sort of, in theory, easier and faster to upgrade. That's not to say that we're using all of that highly efficiently yet. I think our brains, we again, I think we were all, particularly because the last decade has been that sort of year to year and a half upgrade train. We still think in those terms for how we also operationalize it. And so nobody's ready to commit to something like every 6 months I'm going to change my operational roadmap for how things go. They want something that has more durability, and they want to see and plan things out a little more. So I think we have a divide between operationally, we're watching the R&D with more scrutiny to try and pick the right spot, but the R&D and dev process has just rapidly changed and is much faster. So we end up seeing a lot more output that then we have to make the decision as to what actually makes the cut and goes into production.
Right. Yeah, that tallies and makes sense. And you're obviously seeing software. releasing, like say Unreal Engine as an example, that has seemingly a new version every few months
Yep.
with quite significant new features, although not complete direction changes, but significant feature adds. And then some software people will update, especially SaaS, with new smaller features sometimes every 2 weeks, which I guess is somewhat new.
Now, and here's a question for you, and this is one that I feel like I've heard a lot and I've been asked a lot, and I've seen a lot of commentary that in the age of AI, this era of AI we find ourselves in, SaaS is going away and being replaced by AI.
Mm.
I don't know if I completely agree with that. I think SaaS just changes more so is sort of the answer that I have. I think there's still a lot of room for uh, service-based models for this stuff as we think about it. But you work in this environment and in this world too. What is your thoughts around sort of what is it in all of the AI impacts that we're experiencing, which feel like a meteor shower of
Yeah,
effects?
everyone. Yeah,
What is it doing to the SaaS model?
that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, in some parts, something running could run on your machine, or for anyone not familiar with SaaS, software as a service, something effectively running in the internet that you're asking for small amount of input you can send to it. It could send you something back, running something in a browser. The the benefits to doing it are that you don't have to have all the compute on your own machine. Some of these things are extremely compute intensive, and for not everybody can afford the greatest amount of compute at home, even if they have some amount. So I think for a lot of things, it makes sense. For what we're looking at, what we're seeing in the media side of things, there's a huge interest in the exquisiteness of a VO3 type output, which is extraordinary, but that couldn't happen on somebody's personal computer
Right.
right now. And yet, not everybody wants to pay the amount that it costs to be able to do that thing right now. So I feel like that is probably going to become the more sort of significant driver for it, and whether maybe there's a split between different camps of people who will accept what they're capable of doing on their own machine because it maybe costs less or doesn't cost anything. That's why people like using Comfy UI with stable diffusion and models that they can run on their own computer. They're not paying for the tokens. They're not paying for the usage of it. In many cases, I don't know if that gets to continue. I don't know if SaaS. I just think I feel like both get to exist. Is my
I think you
bet.
sort of called on like a good piece of it, which is there is this. I think one of the issues we face right now is we don't know necessarily when we should run it on device or on cloud. Like we had like the again sort of the last 15 years that we're in where we've become very cloud centric. We've gone back to almost the early days of compute, which was a mainframe and client model of
Mm.
I can just run a thin device on from anywhere, but I have the power of I have all of a data center at compute that I can do, and AI is now sort of bringing us back to it is actually important to have some beefy things local as well because there are going to be times that I don't want to pay 3 dozen tokens to make a picture of my French bulldog when I can run it on device. So it's almost bringing back, we're back into this cycle where we have to think of, how robust does the local machine have to be? And now what does that local machine look like? Is it a smartphone, a tablet, a computer, a laptop? What is it? Is
All
it
of the above,
glasses?
probably.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of different things. So how much compute do I need locally? What AI do I run locally versus when do I make the trigger to offload? And then what does the latency of that offload look like to some cloud device?
That's right. Yeah, the computer latency also is a big deal. People, we've looked at, even when I was a software engineer, a while back, I was still remote into nearly 20 years ago now. I would still remote into my machine at work and try and I didn't have much requirement on that. So graphics were terrible. The latency didn't matter too much.
Right.
But it's now got to the point where the latency can be really good as long as the machine is somewhat close to you. I think, yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see where it goes. People will, I think, compute power will always push the edge of what is possible that isn't possible on somebody's machine, either through expense or whatever factor it is. But people will always want to do things on their own machine, and there's it seems like, I don't know, maybe at the moment it's split between making an image fairly likely. You could make a good image on your machine, but making a video a little harder. Maybe that changes to a point where that's easier to do on your own machine. I feel like they will both will continue. Very large compute will continue, on machine will continue. I like it. I've got my phone now can do way more than my first computer ever could.
Oh,
My
yeah.
watch could do more than my first computer ever could.
Exactly.
And I can actually do on the Fold phone. I can do 3D. I can sculpt on this thing, and it folds out, and I can do that. Do I do it? No, not really.
Right.
It's not really the environment that's where I want to do it. I when I first discovered it, I thought, wow, that's amazing that I can do that. I'm going to be doing this from now on, and didn't really touch it that much since, because it's more comfortable at my computer. So
Yeah. I mean, the compute power has grown, so exponentially in our lifetimes that it's, we take it for granted in so many ways. And I think the next evolution of that will be when, quantum computing is just starting to come online and be a thing that feels like it's been a research topic for so long.
yeah,
And now we're starting to see commercial instances of it appear. And many believe that it needs to be more sort of commercialized or operationalized in order for AI to really make that next evolutionary leap. Like we all, every science fiction fan out there, thinks we're jumping to AGI or generalized intelligence of some sort. And it likely is, part of what is holding that back is that next phase of quantum compute. And that will very much not be a thing that lives on our phone. And that will start to differentiate like when we offload something versus when something can be run locally.
the last year of my degree, I think, is when which was 2001, was when they first had a unit at college about quantum computing. And 25 years later, we're still talking about, like, maybe we get it soon. What sort of terrified me, I actually remember looking at it and thinking about it and thinking, when that happens, I think I want to stop being a programmer. Like, how would you code for one of those? I don't know. I still don't know. But I think, yeah, what the essence of what it sounds like you're saying is that we're getting to a point where we maybe need a new paradigm in terms of
For
compute
sure.
to be able to explore things that are this vast. And yeah, I think a lot of people also don't entirely understand what the current AI is or what it's actually doing. They see the end result and infer that it's something almost like us behind it that's making it.
Right. Versus a highly complex, guess the next word system, which is effectively what it is.
Right. Can you tell me a little bit on your thoughts on what the current AI is and what its maybe more potential or limits are?
I mean, it sounds derogatory to say it, but it's a highly complex predictive system of guessing what the next word should be based on, in this case, billions and potentially trillions of instances that it has access to of words being paired together. And I'm saying text to text for the moment.
Yep.
Image is a very similar conversation, though, of based on its understanding of samplings of things, being able to go recreate something based on a description and meet your needs. But it's still, at the end of the day, it's still in a primitive state. Again, it feels sophisticated to us because it feels so much more robust than what we've had to date. But in many ways, that is that there is still such limitations to what it can do, and we're probably, I mean, we definitely are overusing compute power to get the response, the level of response we're doing right now, which is why you see people with very strong and right concerns about the sort of the sustainability and the amount of water it takes for AI workloads to run. So I think we you're right. We do need that sort of the compute paradigm shift in order to get to sort of the next phase. This is just a glimpse of probably where we can go, and we certainly need to keep evolving it. And I'm not advocating that people stop using it or eschew it in their workloads, because I think that's foolhardy. I think it's like to do that would be like, trying to get all your work done with your eyes closed. You're just never going to be able to do it. And I think also, if you want to impact the way that it evolves, you have to participate with it and give critical feedback, and you have to look at it as a critical piece of technology. So
What would you recommend to somebody who's sort of maybe approaching using it for the first time? And there's a lot of things you can use it for, but as a way to explore it, many people might be concerned about it from the ethical perspective, but also the complexity perspective. What would you recommend to somebody who's exploring it for the first time?
I think this is a time where we're all going to go back to school, right? We have to educate ourselves, around it, and it's meaning we can't just go adopt a company's AI and say we're good. Like, if to pick on my old employer, you can't just start using Copilot and say you're a AI expert, because all you're really doing is using one flavor of AI technology that's out there. I think educating yourself about the AI ecosystem, understanding some of the underpinnings of how the thing you're using got created, is incredibly helpful. It's not required, but it will make you holistically understand a little better why it's doing some of what it's doing at times. Um, and and I think right now is a time to be looking at all of the different players in the market, understanding who are the people that are promoting AI, and what are their versions of it, and what are the differences between how those versions act, are pretty important. Often, as I'm thinking through things, I will try it in Gemini on Google, I will try it in Claude and Anthropic, and I will try it in OpenAI or Copilot or something that's using OpenAI. And I'm doing that mainly to understand for myself why it may be answered differently, or where the granularity and the differences comes in. I also like that more and more the LLMs, particularly for text-based work, are showing more of their homework. You're seeing more of the descriptions of how it came to the answer that it got,
Yeah.
and that allows me to go back and think a little more about how I then pose the questions. And I've even done this where uh, uh, I spend a lot of time using generative AI for the research for writing I'm doing, and I will give it the end results, and I will have it pick that apart for me. What are the pieces I'm missing? And I'll look at its critical feedback, and I will likewise, though, try and determine, is it just trying to give me the answer it wants me to have? One thing that I think AI needs to stop doing, and I wish we could build more of this in, and I don't know if they've figured out how to do it, but for me, it's like a eager puppy dog right now. It wants to please you every time it answers you. And I think so rarely is that the case in our human interactions. We deal with plenty of antagonists in our lives, and I think the antagonism often makes us better at what we're doing. And so I would much prefer it stop kissing my butt a little bit and start picking apart and telling me where I'm wrong about a thing, so that I can go correct it.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting sort of check on your own work sometimes to say, well, can you look through this? What do you think? Or and you can also tell it when it's wrong. It's some interesting sometimes when you know it's wrong and you tell it back that to itself that it's wrong, and it says, okay, yeah, you know what, you're right. I'm like, why didn't you just get it right in the first place?
Yeah, and
But
what's
I
curious
understand
about that
why.
one is sometimes you can correct it with the wrong answer, even still
Yes,
now.
yes,
Like that was
that's
a
right.
thing we were doing sort of 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I remember people saying, "Oh, AI is an idiot because I can convince it that 2 plus 2 isn't 4."
Right.
Um, but you can still do that sometimes, and
Yeah.
that to me is like one of the flaws in the system. Like we can only have so much faith in it, as an entity, if we can still trick it.
True. Yeah. I mean, I guess you can also do that with people. It was
100%.
yeah, which is it's interesting whether we're expecting it to be better or worse or the same as people, and people aren't the same as each other. What what are some of the ways that it's helping you?
Yeah. Well, so like I mentioned, I do. There's a couple different ways that I use uh, generative AI right now in my day to day life. One is really as just sort of an ongoing task manager. I mean, one of the greatest gifts I think it gave is I stopped taking notes in meetings and I just talk and I listen
Mm,
and I pay more attention uh, in the moment, because I know there's a transcription coming out the other end, and then I can just ask the transcription what are the action items, or it's now even just helpfully forming it into action items for me,
yeah.
and then I can really start using it to collect all of those together, so that it then acts as a project manager for me. So I can assign uh, different action items out of the variety of meetings I'm in to a given project, and I can ask it to just continually remind me about things until they're done,
Yeah.
which helps me with productivity because it's stuff I all it's doing is offloading the automation that I was having to do for myself,
Mhm.
in many ways, right? In that version of it. But then when I'm using it in more of that research pattern, um, it cuts down on the amount of time I have to Google and go search for and read 25 to 30 different things to get a feel for it. Particularly if I turn out I'm on the wrong track, I can pose it questions and then ask for it to go find a series of different sources to prove that I'm right or I'm wrong, on a premise that I've made. I'm typically particularly when I'm in like a research mode, I'll often say like, I think this is the direction things are going. I need proof that this is the right path, or I need you to tell me that I'm wrong, and that really it's this other direction. And it can go do that in amount of time that would probably take me 2 or 3 days. It can do it in less than a minute, and give me back a direction, and now several things that I can go read and synthesize and think about that help steer and frame up the topic. So what that allows me to do is I spend less time researching, and I'm spending more time often with my like writing. I'm building an outline. So I might have an idea, but then I'm framing out an argument and a statement of all the different facts that I think are relevant. And when I personally approach writing, I'm basically trying to explain it to someone who may not understand it, or they'll have a concept understanding, but they don't have the details I have. So I'm trying to frame it up as an argument to give them all the pieces that will allow them to see why I think it's a certain way. And I can go back and forth with generative AI and that outline and basically let it be the test audience and say, you know nothing about this topic, or you have a vague understanding of it. And if I gave you this version of the conversation in this outline form, do you have all the information you need to make a well-formed opinion? And I can sort of see where there are holes in my own logic. And so several times it's helped me fill in a gap where I'm missing a nuance because I often am talking at this high level and everybody's understanding is at a much lower level about whatever the topic is. And purely that's only because, not because I'm intelligent, it's only because I just spent more time reading about it. And they don't necessarily, they haven't. And so it helps me, it helps sort of, for me, that is the role that an assistant editor might be doing in trying to draw it out. But I could never fit enough time in the day to have all of those conversations. Whereas this is a thing I can do with literally the phone in my pocket while I'm running errands or doing other things. One of my favorite things has become, I used to do a lot of, obviously, I live in Portland, Oregon. I used to drive to Seattle a lot for meetings when I worked at Microsoft. And even in those last, the last year of doing that, instead of listening to podcasts, I would have a conversation with ChatGPT while I was driving, and I would be talking about one of the research topics I was on, and I would have it go find things for me, and I would have it form an opinion, or I would give it a hypothesis, and I would have it poke holes in that, and then I would have all of that as beautiful text output when I got done that could become a new white paper I was working on. Now they're just becoming the articles I work on while I do other things.
Right. How do you find currently that it gets you initially? Do you start with your idea and your outline and uh, something substantial? Do you start with more open questions to it?
It kind of works in both ways. I mean, it's sometimes as simple as I can particularly for super simple things, because I now have a body of work, like it obviously has years of my writing and two different books I've written, so it has a lot of topics that I've basically given it, so it understands a baseline of how I write and what I write about. So I can almost hand it like tech meme every day as a URL and say, what are the topics in here that are going to catch my interest before I even look at anything. I can do that. And this is a game I've played with it a couple of times where it's like, tell me the things I should go read, and then I'll look through the list and I'll see which ones it missed that I think
Right.
are also interesting. But then instead of what I've been trying to do is I try and tell it why the thing it missed is actually also interesting to me,
Mm.
so that it has an updated profile and it thinks about, what that is and where that fits in by my thinking in what it was missing. So I'm sort of continually updating it effectively with how it approaches this. But often on the deeper topics, I come with an informed opinion, and when I do have that, that's often when I try to put it into that sort of what I call red team mode of adversarial. Because I know by default it wants to agree with me. So sort of the first command is, I want you to argue against me on why I'm wrong on this topic. And if it fundamentally can't, then I know I'm maybe in the right direction.
Mm.
My thinking is valid, and then I can sort of begin nuancing it and exploring it and trying to get the information out to explain it. Um, but sometimes I'll also read things and it's like, I honestly don't know what to think about this. I'm sitting and looking at some of the stuff that came out of WWDC yesterday, and started a conversation. I basically dumped a bunch of the press release and the live blogs in, and was trying to sort through, like, what is the real AI story here?
Mm.
Is it a non-story? And trying to use it, and again, it's sort of understanding of how I think at this point to try and determine, uh, you know, whether I'm off track or whether I'm missing some marketing person's point as I think about it. So it's an off. I guess for me, it's kind of an offloaded first place that I bounce ideas off of, and research assistant, and virtual taskmaster for reminding me of the mundane things that I'm supposed to be doing.
Right. Yeah, cutting out some of the things that you'd rather not be doing. Hope maybe you'll get to the point where the meeting note taker comes up with the to-do list and then does some of it without.
Oh, I
But
mean, that is the dream, right? That is
yeah,
that is the place where we right now there's probably too much human intervention in those agent workflows, and more we will get to a point of offloading. I think we do need a popular platform to operationalize it more. Like, and again, going back to Apple, who obviously have a pretty large user base, but Android would be in an equally good position to do this. They have obviously access to all your contact details. They've got your saved wallet of information. There's no reason that when I get a bill, I should be able to have a rule that just says, yeah, when my credit card bill comes in, automatically pay it. I shouldn't even have to have it as a setup function on the credit card website at this point. It should be able to do it. Or likewise, I should be able to tell it to go, book me a trip with these details and have it done. And again, I guess those to date have been more of the SaaSified businesses that were out there that are going to become AI workflows, but there's too many hurdles today. I think there's not enough detail about you in any one place to holistically make that work, with the exception of a platform like an Android or an iOS that knows so much intimate detail about you that it could actually fulfill on that. They just haven't done the work to implement it yet. Google is probably, frankly, farther ahead of it,
Yeah.
But they still haven't made it happen yet.
It's interesting. They were kind of slower to the start line with coming out with inventing the transformer, but then OpenAI having the first public instance of it. But they do have the most kind of cohesive platform of tools in some ways that you can integrate into. There's so many more questions that just come up listening to you talk. What do you think that people should focus on in moving into this age where we can see it now, we can see some of the things it can do now, we're hinting at the future of what it might be able to do. There's lots of talk of like it replacing people's jobs, all the kind of fear aspects of it. What do you think people should focus on? Say both people who are into their mid-career, but also young people who are entering the marketplace and maybe concerned about the automation of things and what they should now be learning or building as skills.
I think regardless of where you are in career, whether mid or end or just beginning, being aware of this as a technology, seed change. Like it is just fundamentally going to be a different way that we do things, but also knowing that it's going to take a number of years for it to fully define and articulate, which means that right now, educating and arming yourself is very important. Being vocal and contributing your ideas and your thoughts will also help. In other words, this is a great opportunity and time. Like, we obviously see a lot of AI startups right now, and we will see a lot more for at least the next 3 to 5 years as new ideas emerge and new. They're not all going to be successful, but they're going to show variations of ideas of how this can be used across our industry in media and entertainment, but across every aspect of our life in many ways. I think the first place is like, while we will benefit from it a lot in media, I think the first fundamental changes we will see are in things like education. And because it's such an opportunity, you can even see in the way that it works now, there's such an opportunity to fundamentally have a personalized education track. And for so long, people have had to just learn in the same way that their cohort does. And if you have dyslexia, dysgraphia, or anything else, or you just ADHD, you name it, then you're getting a marginal version of that education. But having a system, again, that can personalize that experience down to a pretty granular state for you as an individual is pretty impactful. So I think our education is going to radically change. I think we're going to spend a lot less time I think we particularly, and this is true. I personally think within the media space, we've spent a lot of time in the last number of years learning how to do things. It's been very specific. I mean, it's probably been some of the lifeblood blood of CG Pro is like teaching someone how to use Unreal Engine
Yeah,
as a concept. That's
tools and
it's
workflows. Yeah,
it's like learning how to fly a space shuttle.
yeah,
But now, if you have a system that can fundamentally control that at an API level, every aspect, then the training really becomes the why you would do something, not the how. And so I think a lot more of our education will shift back to a why model of critical thinking and the critical skills that that you learn as part of that how training. Like it's not that you don't learn it as part of that, but you're learning it through a UI workflow of I'm learning to do these things and I know that it's because of this. Now we're going to be learning the concepts and we're going to learn how to apply the concepts across a much broader set of applications than we would have ever been able to learn on our own.
right. Yeah, the thoughts come up for me a lot, particularly with some of the dialogue that's happened in recent years with some fairly well-known people talking about not learning to code anymore or not needing to do things like that, which people still do for a living currently, and yet we're also seeing AI being able to assist or do it itself to some extent. And for me, I always felt like my education in computer science was not just about coding. It was really problem solving at its core,
Right.
and actually programming helped me think in a certain way, regardless of whether I was programming or not. What are your thoughts on development and how that might evolve, or how people might be able to adapt?
I feel like it's already changing radically. It's speeding up the iteration process very rapidly, and it's allowing smaller groups or even just individuals to do what a larger group would have done before, which means that you can take a risk and experiment more. So it gives you that opportunity to ideate. Whereas before, you would have to sort of do that ideation at almost a pencil architecture level. Like you had to sort of look at it and make an assumption of a best guess. Whereas now you could actually prove it out a little more. You can let a system play out and and then leverage insight from the AI itself to look for ways to course correct it. So I think we see lots more opportunity to do iteration, much in the way that it helps create 1,000 storyboards instead of one on the creative side. It does that as a direct reflection in development work as well. I think
Yep,
where it gets a little trickier and a little more complicated, particularly today, and I think again this resolves itself as the technology matures, is that there's there's still a lot of room. There's a lot of open room for how it interprets our prompts and our commands and our requests. And when you're in a production environment, there's that is a very critical system where there's a lot of dependencies, and so there's a lot of danger of having a system that is doesn't really understand the intent of what you want. And
mm,
if you've allowed AI to have too much hand in building it out without doing the security and operationalizing of it, that's where the implicit danger lies. Not danger in the sense that it's going to steal my identity, but in the sense that it's simply not going to work and it's going to crash repeatedly or something else.
yep,
So I think there's still a period of time where there's a lot of human intervention that is required to get the large deployments up and running, but we have a lot more chance to use the AI for the iteration development to experiment to find the right path forward that we actually want to take.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. We're not nobody's really debugging binary anymore. We're
Right.
working in higher level languages, and now we're trying to bridge that last final gap where we can talk to machines and in our own language. Code has been a language that's close to our own language for quite some time, but this is like the final frontier where we're hoping to only use language, and yet we're still using the next step down at least. Not
Right.
many people debugging assembler either, but that still exists. Binary still exists, voltage change still exists, all the steps below it still exist. Do you wonder or think that it might get to a point where it's creating things that become really hard for humans to understand how they work or debug, or any concerns where we should like turn it off or limit it? Or
I think that my hope would be is that we continue to stay curious about how it functions, and even as we let it take on more responsibility, having an implicit understanding by at least some subsection of the crowd, the audience, in how that is actually working, so that debugging and tooling can still be taken on. And that would be my best case hope in my future utopia, where we still have people who want to do that and have the critical eye on it. And I know those people still exist today. So it is my hope that as we move forward, we keep that as part of what we do, because I do think it's important to know how things function when the system fails. And
yeah,
you could say that is still even true now. Before we went live, we were talking about the perils of just your power going out and having to
yeah,
deal with internet and other things, and even just knowing how to route around those as things are something we inherently know how to do today. And it's still a subsection. Like, I think when the power goes out and I'm not at home, I think my wife just simply leaves the house rather than trying to worry about bringing everything back up. Uh,
yeah.
because she knows that I'm going to deal with it eventually. And
It's a
I think,
solution. Yeah,
that's probably still true in an AI world. There is a subset of people that are going to be tending to this and helping with it. But you're right. We will probably have a point where we level up and it's doing the debugging at the JS level, or the Python and scripting levels that we think about, and we're thinking at a much higher order level than we are currently, and that we have in the past. Much as the way that my uncle was a programmer in financial services going back to the 50s, and he still thinks in machine code, and COBOL was the newest thing he ever worked in.
yeah.
And so the stuff that we have today, he wouldn't even begin to comprehend it.
Tiny bit of that's still alive as well.
Yeah.
What are you excited about in terms of let's say what's the creative or the like the filmmaker in you
Yeah.
excited about?
God, that is a great question. And I think the thing that to me is fascinating, and we have such a strong opportunity for now, which I think the studios will see as a challenge, is this gives us a world where it's ripe for remixing. I think we are at the brink of an age of remix culture in the way that we've not seen before. And I'll give you the example. My teenage daughter rewatched all of Game of Thrones with us over the last year. Loved it at the beginning, and like everybody else, hated like the last two seasons and thought it was ridiculous, and was furious at the way that it ended, and stormed upstairs and slammed her bedroom door. And like an hour later, came downstairs with a GPT that she had rewritten the entire last half of the last season of Game of Thrones. And I read it and I was like, this is actually pretty good. And I would watch it. And I get, and then that led to well, now that the program's over, what is everybody else in that world doing? And so then it became a challenge for the family of like, pick your favorite character and what is their next two seasons of their story where they're the hero look like. And I think there's just opportunity for that to exist on a much higher order scale in this future, where yes, versions of stories that directors and showrunners are going to exist that tell us, but we now have our ability to to put our finger on the story as well and give our flavor of it, which might have its own audience, even if that's only an audience of, my family or a small subsection of others who want to see it. It's your take on that tale. And I think that is fascinating. And particularly with some of the quality that we're seeing even output from models now, there's just such opportunity for that to exist that I want to see more of that.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting idea, I guess, is we've explored as humans going back a while with choose your own adventure books, but still all of the outcomes were predetermined. And yeah, people would write their own fan fiction sometimes, but that's complicated in
Right.
itself. And that you're suggesting that yes, some
This
people
is
will
like
want to
fan
do that.
fiction on
Yeah,
steroids.
yeah,
There could be an entire world. There could be an entire studio that simply has effectively like a rough set of characters, not even like complete storylines, maybe some simple storylines they produce and a set of characters, and then they simply turn it over to an audience and let them create entire new scenarios that they sort of co-share intellectual property credit with in some way. I think it's a fascinating idea. It's almost like combining Sims and a movie studio.
right. Yeah, and to that point, we're also seeing some interactive
Mm-hmm.
explorations, like even some stuff I saw recently with generative video that generates in real time and kind of looks like you're walking around a weird, smeary, but like kind of game level of sorts, but it's
Right.
actually being made from video on the fly as you turn and move through that world.
I think the interactive part I didn't mention that, but I think there's so much opportunity. Like every interaction, the Bandersnatch examples that Netflix did, those will seem like such quaint and crude versions of what interactive content could look like in the future, where you're watching something that truly just simply looks like real life video and real life world, but you're either a character in it or you're simply a voice of God that's defining the direction that the story goes. And the compute is starting to be there that it can render that virtually on the fly for you, and new stories and new patterns emerge from it. So it can become a highly personalized version of that experience over time. And again, there might be an audience for the way you perceive something versus someone else.
Yeah, it's all taste, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody likes different stuff, and yeah, it's going to be it's going to be interesting one way or the other.
I mean,
We'll see what
it goes
happens.
back to this notion, like at a high level, we talked, I think, very early on about this being sort of storytelling, and what it's doing is, we in the professional media world, there's so much time spent learning the craft to be able to tell a story, and this now opens up a door to say maybe you don't need as much time learning the craft, you just need to understand storytelling better, and the tools will then help you do that. So we now open up a whole new audience of storytellers, and I don't think people who were brought up in a different version of that world should feel like they were done a disservice because they spent time learning a lot of components as part of it. Because I think what it did was it just taught you to be a better storyteller, and I think you will immediately adapt and grok those new tools inherently, just as quickly as the new storytellers will.
Yeah, yeah, fundamentals. It's what we come back to most often in the school is teaching. I think we're known for teaching things like Unreal Engine and moving into the AI space and Houdini and all sorts of things, which are tools and techniques. But the fundamentals behind why, I think you mentioned the word why you would use those in the first place, which is really what's the outcome, what's the problem you're trying to solve, what's the storytelling involved in this. Ultimately, at the very back end of that whole process, we're huge on fundamentals because I do believe those will be the things that will persist no matter what tools
Agreed.
change.
Super important.
It's woven into every course we do. I think it's a Trojan horse because people come in to learn a tool usually, but they leave learning deeper into the fundamentals because that's what I believe in the most. Andy, is there anything else you would like to share? Places where people can follow you or
Yeah,
learn more about you?
across most social, you can find me as Andy Beach on pretty much every site you would imagine. But I post to a Substack. I'm engine that I've been doing writing. It's called Engines of Change. The URL is enginesofchange.ai. And I try to put up a lot of my thoughts there collectively about what we're doing at the intersection of AI and media and storytelling. And other than that, doing a lot of talks and starting a podcast of my own, which I'm talking to you guys about and trying to get your help and understanding around, and trying to figure out how we help merge these two together.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to the podcast. I know those links are going out as we speak and will again when this is published. But I really appreciate you being on. This has been a wonderful
Yeah,
conversation.
thanks,
And
Ed. I love talking about this stuff and love your insight and perspective on this as well. Really appreciate any time I can have a conversation. Next time, let's do it over a cocktail.
absolutely, we didn't get cocktails into the podcast nearly enough. I'm sorry. We'll
Agreed.
have to do another episode just about cocktails. We'll
There,
only
there,
talk about cocktails.
an entire industry around talking about media technology and day drinking.
Yeah. I look forward to it. Well, again, thank you so much for being a part of it today. I look forward to your podcast and
Thanks, Ed.
yeah, anything we can do to help.
Appreciate it, and thank you to Jackie as well. I know she can hear this somewhere in the background, so appreciate everything both of you are doing.
Thank you. And yeah, thank you also to our studio audience. Thanks for being a part of this today, unless you're listening on the recording, in which case, thank you for listening anyway. Again, if you would like to join us tonight, if you're hearing this in time, we have an open day for CG Pro. You can come and join a Zoom call live with people, real humans, talking about computer graphics. And we're particularly highlighting tonight the new version of Unreal Engine, which is still one of my favorite 3D tools, and I think is going to be a big part of being able to tell things like AI what it is that we want it to do from a visual perspective. But we'll be going through 5.6, so join us for that. And if you're interested in AI, we have a course that we're running in concept and previs currently with our brand new platform. But thanks all. I will look forward to our next episode in 2 weeks, and we'll see you all soon. Cheers again, Andy.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.